The first speaker today is Roger Warburton, one of my colleagues. Actually, it's Roger's fault that I work here. Not that that's a bad thing, by the way. It's probably the best decision I've ever made in my life, coming to work at BU. But Roger and I met in Warsaw in Poland in 2008 at a project management research conference. And he persuaded me that this would be a good move for me. And I have to say that he was right. I'm going to introduce Roger, but before I do that, and while I'm trying to get his slides up on the stage, I know that Vijay wants to make a surprise announcement as the conference chair.
All right. It's not much of an announcement as an appreciation for Roger. 10 years ago, when Roger joined, I asked him, we should be doing something called project management in practice. And he said, well, I like to do research like all faculty. We use our time in the summer to do research. I don't know. But I said, no, please, please, please. You'll be the conference co-chair. And the rest is history. So I'd like to simply acknowledge 10 years on this 10th anniversary. Roger, you've been an outstanding co-host, co-chair. You sacrificed everything you had just to help us out, make this thing run like magic for 10 years. This is from my own budget. Tanya, it is not from BU budget. It's a $100 Amazon gift certificate from me personally.
Okay, so Roger is an associate professor here. He's been here for 10 or 11 years now, is one of the mainstays of our project management program. He really specializes in supply chain calculations and project management calculations, really strange stuff. I walk into his office, he has this whiteboard and it's covered in equations and squiggles, and I just look at it and go, Roger, I have no idea what you're doing here. But he gets it published in really good journals. He's a great academic. He's a great part of the program. And I would like to welcome Roger to the podium to do the first presentation. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Wow. This is a little bit of a mutual admiration society, as you already can tell, because we would not be here without Vijay, right? And he did come to me and say, we should do a conference. And I said, yeah, sure. What I didn't realize is every time Vijay has an idea, it ends up on my desk. So this is the 10th anniversary of the following discussion, okay? Which goes like this. What's the most important thing in project management? Communications, right? Vijay says 90% of project management is communications. I say, what are you going to communicate? And the answer is cost and schedule. So like the chicken and the egg, my part comes first, cost and schedule, right? So when, as always happens, you get told what you're going to do by Vijay, you don't get asked, which is fine, okay? And he said, next year you're going to do technical. We haven't done technical in a couple of years. I said, fine. So what I'm going to do is bridge the gap between the research and what you do in your daily life. Where is it going and what's important? And hopefully what you can go back on Monday and tell your boss, I learned something really interesting on Friday. So let me start with this question. If project management were a car, what kind of car would we be, right? Well, I've got some words from the Project Management Institute website, these kinds of words. We're not a Volkswagen, we're much more sophisticated than that. In fact, we're well beyond the average sedan, okay? We're probably not a classic automobile because we feel we're sophisticated and modern, right? And a truck is way too utilitarian, okay? We are so much better than that, along with the minivan. But we're probably not a Formula One car either, which is way out there, right? So my proposal is we're actually this. Okay. So my question, however, is what drives this car, right? What is the technical piece that drives us forward? And my answer, somewhat surprisingly, is under the hood is a hamster, okay? Yesterday, they were doing communications, which is fine, and everybody was saying how important communications is. I was a little bit disturbed to hear Carla say that we don't do a good job in teaching communications, that the people in industry come back to us and they say, we do a really good job of technical, but you guys in academics don't do such a good job in communications. And I was okay with that because I don't teach communication, so it's not my problem. However, my view was, oh, because I don't think we do such a great job in the technical side either, which I'm going to tell you about. So, why? So, this is the question that many people in the room have heard me ask on many occasions. How you doing? And the answer, you know, everybody in a project, your customer wants to know how you're doing, right? And the answer is, how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost, right? So, here's a classic chart. We have a budget, and the green line is my plan. And here I am some way into the project. The red line is my progress. And everybody wants to know, where is this thing going, right? How much is it going to cost? And the technical word, estimate at completion, right? So, this is the formula, and it's pretty simple. As I tell people, the estimate at completion is the budget divided by the CPI, and the CPI is EV over AC, which is a percentage. So it's not very difficult. You merely calculate a percentage, and you have the new budget, right? So let's do a simple example, because I love doing simple examples. Let's suppose I got a contract with a publisher, VJ, to write a book. 10 chapters, 1 per month. I will complete it in 10 months, right? My estimate is that each chapter is going to cost $100, so the cost of the book is $1,000. So my plan is $1,000 a month. Now, I deliver 3 chapters, and I deliver them on time. But I have to work overtime to complete them. So my cost each month is $120. This is a very simple example, right? So my cost is $120 a month. So my cumulative earned value, because that's the plan, is 100, 200, 300, but my actual cost is 120, 240, 360. So my CPI is 0.83. Standard stuff, right? First course in project management. My CPI is 0.83, so my budget is now $1,200. And I'm going to skip all the communications issues of telling my customer that I have an overrun, right? What do you do as a project manager? No problem. We had some startup issues, right? This is what we say. We got a little bit behind. Don't worry, we're going to make it up. Not a problem. But then the PMBOK in the 4th edition snuck something in there. And it was called TCPI. And everybody was, what's that? In fact, that's what everybody at BU said. They said, we don't know what that is, give it to Roger. He does the math, right? So this is the definition. And it says it's the performance to be achieved on the remaining work to meet the budget. Well, okay. So my first comment is, and I'm sorry to all the PMI people in the room, it's misnamed because it really should be the to complete cost performance index, because there's actually a to complete schedule performance index, is there not? Right. Moving on. This is the definition. It's the budget minus the earned value, which is the work to date, divided by the budget minus the cost. So from that little book example, we've completed 3 chapters, so we've earned $300. There are 7 chapters remaining, so the budget minus the work to date is $700. The fund remaining is simply 1,000 minus the 360 that we've spent, so the TCPI is 1.09. What does that mean? Okay, what it means is we need a 9% improvement to get back on budget. Okay, 9%. No big deal, right? So, the performance to get back on 9%, no problem, right? Yeah, we're a little behind, but don't worry about it. We're going to make it up. Now, unfortunately, in comes the smart customer. And this is the change that happened in the 4th edition of the PMBOK, because this was not oriented to all the project managers in the room. This one is oriented to your customer, okay? And the customer says, wait, you're working at 83% efficiency. That's what the CPI equal 0.83 means. And you've got to get to 1.09, so actually you need a 26% improvement. Suddenly, it's not so easy to make that up, okay? So, in month 5, actually, this is kind of interesting. Things get worse, and they get worse quickly, right? In month 5, you've delivered 5 chapters, so the remaining work is 500, and you spent $600. So you're still working at the 83%, that hasn't changed, but you need to get the 1.25. So now you need a 42% improvement, okay? And the thing about the TCPI is it always wins. You can't make it up. Eventually you're going to have to say, I have a real problem here, okay? And now remember, this is your customer can do this, right? So your customer is going to come to you and say, you need a 40% improvement. You've done 5 months worth of work at 83%. You haven't improved. You're in trouble, okay? And so now our customer is smart. So here's one thing, you have to forgive me, being the real geek in the room. There's a quantity in project management that goes to infinity. Now, how cool is that, right? I mean, genuinely goes to infinity. Probably, come on, how many people think that's cool? Yeah, it's usually me when I say that, right? Okay, so here's the bottom line. You are all trained in calculating the CPI, which is a backward-looking thing from the project management perspective, project manager's perspective. The TCPI is a forward-looking thing from the customer's perspective, okay? So, once your customers start computing TCPI, we're going to be in trouble because we won't be able to lie anymore. All right, let's turn to schedule. Okay, we did cost. Let me turn to schedule. So, first of all, we have this thing called a schedule variance. And of course, it is not a variance at all, right? I mean, we all hate statistics, even me, and that's fine. But in no sense is it a statistical variance, okay? So you calculate the schedule variance as the earned value minus the planned value, and you get minus $500. And so you say to your boss, we're behind schedule. My schedule variance is negative, and I'm behind schedule. And your boss says, well, how far behind schedule are you? And you say, I'm $500 behind schedule. And your boss says, what does that mean? And you say, I don't know, because you don't. So here's another problem. When the CPI applies to all activities. If any activity is over budget, then you're over budget, right? But that's not true of a schedule. Take that little guy there that I circled in blue. If that one's late, and the critical path is the red path down there, that one's late, you don't care, right? In fact, you could even argue the opposite. You could say, I'm such a great project manager that that one there I knew wasn't on the critical path, and so I took some resources away from that and I put it on the critical path and my project is still on schedule, right? So the SPI should not apply to critical activities or not, okay? We don't know. All right, so let me tell you how to get out of this bind. Schedule estimation, how do we do this? So we have a plan which is in green there, and I always do very simple problems because if you can analyze a simple problem and learn something, you understand it and you can play with it and tweak it and so on, right? So here's my budget. I mean, the green line is my plan and TP is my delivery, my schedule. And my earned value is where I am now at time t, okay? How do I compute the schedule? Well, I do the following. I project back from that point on the earned value curve onto the planned value curve, and that time has got a fancy name called the earned schedule. And everybody says, oh, this is really hard. No, not really. Okay, and if you actually calculate that, then this is the formula for the schedule. It's very simple. It says my actual schedule is the time times the plan divided by that earned schedule that you just calculated, okay? And that's all there is to it. So you can calculate the schedule, right? You don't use the CPI, you use this. So why do I say that our engine is actually the little hamster on a wheel, okay? Because it seems like I've just told you how to calculate your budget, your estimate of completion. I've told you how to calculate the schedule. What else do you need to know, right? Okay, so let's open up the hood. Here's my plan. What actually happens? Here's my earned value point. This is where I am today, right? What the formula says is, if I draw a straight line from the origin through my point, that's my new schedule, okay? That's what that formula actually says. Okay, but it's a point estimate. What if that's a rotten point? What if something weird happened that week, right? Then your estimate is weird, okay? What about the cost? So here I've drawn again my schedule. Well, when you estimate the cost, you have a cost point. You draw that line, which intersects now the red line that you established when you calculated the schedule, and that's your estimate of completion, okay? Why do I care about that? Okay, let's talk, this is cumulative. Let me talk about weekly data. What you're assuming is that your weekly data is constant. You have the same number of people working on the project every week, each of them working the same number of hours, so the cost is the same every week. That is what you're actually assuming when you do this calculation, okay? All right, so you're actually assuming your project is doing this. Your plan is in green, your work accomplishment is, in this case, behind schedule, is constant, and your actual cost expenditure is also constant, right? So, how many people in this room work on a project in which the same number of people work on it every week? One? Maybe two or three? Right. Right. Oh, yes, right, a one-person project. Good point. All right, let's talk about a really interesting project. Okay, this is the Oxford English Dictionary Project. And this was studied by a very good friend of mine named Dennis Chaffee, who teaches project management at George Washington University. Okay? And the Oxford English Dictionary is a fascinating project. It was started in 1858 and completed in 1928. Okay? The plan was it would take 10 years, so it was supposed to be done in 1868. It was supposed to have 7,000 pages and 4 volumes. Actually, there are 12 volumes, 400,000 words, and 1.8 million citations. It was also what we would call today an open source project, because people were sent books, because remember, this is 19th century, right? So everything was mailed out, people would write all the notes. James Murray was the editor. He took over as editor in 1879 when they were up to B, right? So 20 years in, they were up to B. He left school at 14, had no formal education that we would consider, spoke 8 languages, and read 26 languages, including some very old languages that I didn't even know how to pronounce their names, right? He was 35 years as the editor of the OED and was knighted for his work in 1908. But he was a classic project manager, and he was really good at it, okay? For example, this should sound familiar. The publisher said, get this thing done, get it out, we want to be done. And the scholars would say, no, we need to add some more words, right? Classic project management debate. In fact, Dennis's article is all about the project management of this particular project. And I have to put in this. Murray was very interested in pronunciation, and he was friend with a Professor Bell in London. And he gave Bell's teenage son his first lessons in electricity, Alexander Graham, right? Who, of course, is a Boston University professor and invented the telephone just down the road here, right? And Alexander said that Murray was the grandfather of the telephone. Anyway, what does this have to do with this chart, right? As fascinating as this project is. Let's go back to weekly data. Well, here's the weekly data for the Oxford English Dictionary Project, okay? This is actually pages produced, and the green line is the plan. Actually, it's the revised plan when it was taken over. And this is beginning to look like projects that we actually work on, right? Now, here's the point. When you do the estimate at completion and the schedule calculation, you are assuming the red line. And you're assuming your plan is the green line, okay? Technically, you're assuming it's linear, right? How realistic is that? Not very, okay? This is why I suggest that there's that little hamster in the BMW, right? So, those two formulas assume the red line, okay? So it's a miracle they work. And in fact, sometimes they don't. On the Oxford project, the red line, if you use that estimation formula I showed you, you get the red line, right? Which is wrong everywhere except that one point, okay? It just doesn't work, all right? A little bit of advertising. If you want to do some fancy stuff from Warburton and Chaffee, then you can use the blue line. If you'd like to know how to do schedule estimation for your project and you have some cool data, come talk to me later. All right, a glimpse into the future. Where's this all going? Here's a network diagram, okay? The branching ratio is 2, and the probability of a leaf node is 50%. That means that a leaf node has no descendants, right? This is the simplest network diagram you could think of. Okay. Well, if you continue with it on like that, then your labor rate is constant, right? There are 2 people working on the project. So this relates the structure of the project to the cost of schedule, right? So Dennis and I wondered, could we take this really fancy, excellent theory called thermodynamics and do some work on the project as a system? And the answer is sort of yes, okay? So what we did, for example, we noticed that at the end of the project, there tend to be more leaves, right? And with a few basic assumptions, we can, in fact, the black line here is a project, real project plan to which we can do real cost and real schedule estimation, okay? So we're busy working on that, and we'd love to have some people help us out with some data. So let's now talk about what this means to your technical competencies. So the first thing is, people don't use earned value. Why? Because there are no documented requirements. They don't use the WBS. And when I show this to my students, they say, wait, this is bad project management, right? This has nothing to do with earned value, right? This is just dumb. But there's really good reasons for using it because basically it works, right? So why don't people use it if it works? It's only good for large defense projects. Well, it's true that earned value was built for the Defense Department in the 60s and 70s, but we should have moved on by now. Oh, it's too complicated for us, it's too costly, it's hard to apply, we can't possibly do it. And I say, it's a percentage, get over it. We don't need it on small projects. My favorite, by the way, we don't need it on small. Okay, so you're working on a small project, you don't want to know whether it's over budget, you don't want to know whether it's over schedule, you don't care? Small organizations, we don't collect that kind of data. It's expensive to collect that kind of data. Wait, I need the plan value, the earned value, and the actual cost. Those are the three things I need. Let me see. Every month I write a letter to my customer that says, this is what I plan to do, this is what I did, and this is how much it cost, right? You have to write that to your customer every month. You've just told your customer the plan value, the earned value, and the actual cost, which goes back to my comment about the smart customer. Your customer can now compute the TCPI, he can compute, or she can compute everything about your project, right? You can't hide anymore from your customer. So, it's really good for cost estimation. It sort of works for some projects for schedule estimation, and people make silly excuses for not doing it, okay? So, what does that say about you and your status from a practical perspective? First of all, the state of the art is not great. In fact, this is the book on the Gantt chart, and let me magnify the publication date for you. 1923, right? There's not much in this. Sorry, if Gantt himself, or the person who wrote it, Wallace Clark, came here today and asked what we were doing in cost estimation, he'd say, it's all in my book, right? We actually haven't made a lot of progress since 1923. So the state of the art is not great, which is why it's the little hamster in the BMW. On the other hand, there's really good news for you particularly. It goes like this. This is what I need to know, right? I need to know the estimate of completion and how to do schedule estimation. And they work most of the time. And so you can go to your boss or get a new job because you can do what practically nobody else wants to do. Thank you.